welcome to our Grad School 101 workshop. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Julie Steers, and I am the Senior Program Coordinator for our Graduate Studies Center. So today we're going to talk all about grad school and getting started with grad school. So again, thank you for joining us. I do want to start the presentation with assuring everybody that you will receive the recording of the session, and you will also receive the slides after the session. So feel free to take notes, ask us questions, but you're going to get resources after the session. We'll be emailing them out to the email that you registered with. Okay, so you will get the recording and the slides that you can refer back to. So hopefully that'll be helpful to everybody. I also want to do a quick intro of my colleague Carolyn, who's on the call here. She'll be helping with the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat throughout, and we'll also have time for questions at the end. So don't worry, we will answer your questions. And if not, we'll give you some follow-up information so you can always reach back out to us. Okay. All right, I think that's all the housekeeping we have to do. So let's go ahead and get started with Grad School 101. All right, so here's our agenda for today. We are going to talk about what is grad school. We'll give you some basics just to give you a frame of reference, especially if you're not familiar yet. We'll also talk about why grad school, what are some of the reasons that people are still choosing to go and get their master's, their graduate degrees, and why you might want to be one of those people. We'll talk about how to find the right program for you, and also actually applying for grad school. What does that look like? What do you need to do? And then we'll talk a little bit about funding opportunities and where to look for funding. And then we'll also give you some campus resources that you can utilize during your time as you're preparing for that application process. Okay. And then again, we should have time for questions at the end as well, but feel free to type those into the chat and we'll get to those too. All right, so starting us off, what is grad school? So we're going to give you a little bit of preview. Some of you might know this already, and that's great. Hopefully we'll give you some additional insight. So grad school comes after a bachelor's degree. Okay, so if you're in your undergrad, earning your bachelor's degree now, grad school is an optional next step that some students will move on to. I definitely say some students and optional, but hopefully you're interested in a grad program if you're at this workshop today. Okay, then the degree itself. So if you are in your undergrad program, you're earning a bachelor's degree, right? It might be Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science. If you go to a grad program, there's a variety of degrees that you could come out of it with. So you want to make note, of what programs will give you which degrees. A few examples are on the screen: Master of Science, of Arts, of Fine Arts, Doctor of Philosophy, which is a PhD. There's many others, but those are just some examples of grad degrees that you would earn if you go to a graduate program. Okay. As far as requirements, well, they vary greatly, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but application requirements are going to be different for each program and each school that you're applying to. If you apply, for undergrad, when you applied, you might have had kind of one application and you selected different campuses and sent everything there and it was good to go and you applied to all these campuses, right? Especially for UCs or Cal State systems, it's going to be kind of like that. But for grad programs, it's not as much like that. It's really varied depending on your program, because all will have different requirements. You might have similar base requirements, but then some might require a writing sample or other things that we'll talk about a little bit more too. So keep that in mind. It's not a one size fits all. Okay. And then timeline, similarly, is not a one size fits all. Students can start grad school right after completing their undergrad degree, their bachelor's, or you can take some time off and gain work experience, internship experience, anything like that, and then start your degree later. So it really just depends on you and what your focus is, okay? All right, so a little bit more about grad programs specifically. So a graduate program is going to be more of a specialized study. In undergrad, you get a little bit of everything, right? Even when you think about your GE requirements, your general ed requirements, or even in your major courses, you kind of start with foundational knowledge and a little bit of general knowledge about the field and your major. But with grad school, the goal is to really hone in on that interest that you've discovered in undergrad and get a lot more advanced focused study, okay, in either an academic discipline or profession. Okay, so you're going to kind of focus in a lot more with a grad program. Research, grad programs are often centered on generating new research or original research in a particular discipline. It kind of depends though. Some are a little more professional in nature, but it's definitely more research focused than an undergraduate program or a bachelor's program. Okay. And then speaking of professional, some graduate programs are really centered on specific professions and developing skills and knowledge for that specific profession. Some examples at the top of my head, like counseling, right, where you're coming out of, or anything where you're coming out of it with like a teaching credential or even an MBA, law degree, things like that, where you're kind of coming out of it with a professional degree that leads you into a professional career. Okay, so it kind of depends on the program. These are different options, but for the most part, you're going to see these themes throughout graduate programs as you start your research. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what is grad school. I think it's usually helpful to compare it to undergrad, especially for students who are currently in undergrad or have just finished their undergrad, so that you get a little bit of a feel. How is it different? Okay, so in terms of curriculum, your coursework, in undergrad, a lot of times bachelor's degrees are going to offer more structured curriculum and content that students are expected to learn and retain. You go to lecture, you remember some dates, you remember some theories, right? You apply it in different ways, but students at the end of the day are expected to learn what is already known. Okay, what's already been written about, what's already been researched, and what is known about your field. Okay, in grad school, it's a little different. Master's programs and doctorate programs, they still have required courses, but often they're less structured and they're going to give you more content that increases your autonomy or your independence. So you're going to have a little more room to think about, what do I want to learn? What do I want to investigate and think about? Okay, and grad students are expected to create new knowledge, right, and new research content based on their interest in the fields. So this can be really exciting in a grad program because you get to, identify something within your field that you're most interested about, that you want to dive deeper into, and that you want to maybe even research or make your own findings about. Okay. Also, in terms of academic expectations, there are some differences between an undergrad program and a grad program. So undergrads are typically in good academic standing if you have a GPA of 2.0 or above. And there's a lot more opportunities to repeat coursework if that required grade is not earned. For CSUF example, you can, as an undergrad student, CSUF students can repeat 28 units of coursework, right? So that's a lot of It's a lot of do-overs that you get, which is really helpful for students as they're starting college. However, in grad school, you're not going to get as much do-overs or as much leniency as you do in undergrad in terms of your academics. Okay, so grad students are typically in good standing if you have a GPA of 3.0 or above. Some programs might have higher GPA requirements like a B or better, at least in specific classes or even in all of them, depending on the university, and less flexibility to retake coursework, right? So if you're not getting the grades that you need, you just don't have as much flexibility there because you're at a higher level. So they're holding you to that standard, okay? And then in terms of course load, there's a few differences you might want to note as well. At CSUF, undergrads, just an example again for Fullerton, undergrads usually take 12 semester units to be full-time, but you can take up to 18 semester units, right? And part-time options are available depending on the program. At CSUF, grad students usually take 9 to 12 units to be full-time. So it's definitely a lesser course load, but it's because, again, you're being held to higher standards and you have more work in those classes. So you're taking less classes, but you're still doing, you know, just as much work, if not more, okay? And there's still part-time options available depending on your program and where you're looking. So you want to keep that in mind if that's something that you need, but we'll talk about that more. Okay. All right, so this is an example of what the CSU does, but a lot of times other grad programs are going to do something similar. This is called a culminating experience. Often this is something that comes at the end of your graduate program, kind of wraps everything up. And it's something that shows everything that you've learned, right, during your grad program. So there's a few different options that we do here at the CSU. Again, you'll find similar things at other programs across different universities. But this is just to give you, you know, an idea of what to look for and what's to come, okay? So a lot of times you'll have a thesis that you'll need to write. This is a written product of a systematic study of a significant topic. So it's a paper. You're writing it, it comes out, the product is a paper, okay, a research paper. So that's a thesis, and all of the specifics are going to depend on the university and the program. Then another option is a project. This is going to look different depending on the program and the specialization or field that you're in, but it's still a significant undertaking. And a lot of times you'll see it in the arts or in professional fields. So maybe it's a final, you know, presentation, maybe it's a portfolio. It kind of just depends, but it's not necessarily going to be a written paper. It might have something written to go with it, but not just a paper, okay? And then a comprehensive exam. So that's, you know, an assessment of the student's ability to integrate knowledge and kind of everything that they've learned in their program. A lot of times this is tied to a specific profession. Maybe you have boards that you have to pass or to earn a credential, things like that. So sometimes there's an exam tied to your program. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what is grad school, giving you some more details. So let's talk about why grad school. I think especially now, right, a lot of people, you know, post or whatever part we're in of COVID have said, well, maybe I don't want to do grad school. Maybe I want to work at a startup or do something a little different. And that's all great, but there's still a lot of good reasons that people are still funneling themselves into grad programs. So we want to identify some of those so that you can think about it if you're still kind of on the fence. Okay, so greater income potential is probably the top reason that students are going to grad programs still. You'll see from the grid on the side. This is data from the US Bureau of Labor Stats, and you'll see what it's showing you is median weekly earnings based on education level. Okay, so you'll see the higher you go with your education, for the most part, right, the more earnings that you're going to get on a weekly basis. So it is a correlation with higher income potential. Okay. So on top of that, there's also lower unemployment rates among people who have graduate degrees or higher level degrees. There's increased leadership role opportunities. Sometimes it's a base requirement for a job. So if you know what job you want and everything that you see posted for those jobs says master's degree, you're probably not going to get around getting a master's degree, and you're going to have to go get that, right? So that you meet that requirement so you can get that job that you want. It also means mobility for your family and community. Maybe you're the first one thinking about a master's program or ready for a master's program, and that's great. And that can really shape your network and the people around you as well. There's also larger access to healthcare and retirement plans because you're getting usually a higher quality job that's going to have better benefits for their staff and for their employees. Personal, educational, and learning goals. So maybe you just really want to focus on something. You just have this research topic that you have to do. And so grad programs can help with that. Kind of similar, lifelong learner. Maybe you just have to keep going, right? We see people coming back to school after lots of time off or being in the workforce, and they just want to learn. And that can be the reason too. Okay, and definitely check out the US Bureau of Labor if you want some more stats on different occupations and where the biggest growth is happening. So that can be a really great and reliable place to get some resources. Okay, so hopefully this has led you to the part where you want to start finding the right grad program, okay? And this is really exciting, but also it's not something that we can tell you exactly what you should do. It's really up to you and your interests and what you need, okay? So there's so many universities and programs out there, so you're gonna have to really kind of push up your sleeves and do the research so that you find the one that's right for you, okay? Starting with an idea of your career goals or your career interests is usually a really great place, because then you can almost work backwards. If you know what job you want, you can know what grad program or what degree is usually most helpful and kind of go from there. And it can also just help shape where you want to go if you start to figure out your career trajectory. So first thing that we recommend for you to do, if you haven't already, is utilize the Career Center. So at Fullerton, we have a great Career Center, and they can help you identify those career goals and understand some career outcomes in the job market, things like that. So definitely utilize the Career Center if you haven't already. Also, reach out to your professors. They've all gotten their graduate degrees, either master's or PhD. Ask them their experience. Professors love to talk about themselves, first of all, so don't be scared to ask them. And they can give you more information of how it went and what they would recommend, and even connect you with their colleagues who might be across different universities or even campus, okay? Informational interviews are also really great resources. This is basically talking with someone who has a job that you may want, right? So getting a feel for, what do you do every day? Do you like it? What are the downsides and things like that? And it just gives you insight to the real picture of a position that you might be thinking about, okay? And then, of course, network. Utilize the people around you, your classmates, staff, coworkers, alumni. Ask them what they did. Ask them what they're thinking about. Tell them your goals. Maybe they have suggestions for you. Also going to conferences, grad school fairs, career fairs are really great places to get started when you're thinking about grad school too. Fullerton always has a grad school fair in the fall semester, so you can always check that out, as well as other campuses. You can always go to those too. And then professional organizations, like if you are a student member of a psychology organization, for example, they'll often have programs kind of highlighted that you can be pointed to, or you can see where other people went to school and kind of get ideas there. Okay, so those are really great starting points. Okay, so now let's get into the specifics. What are things when you're researching that you should really take into account for all of these grad programs, right? Because you have to decide what's the right program, but what should you consider? So first, I would say coursework. This is what you're actually going to learn. Okay, so this is really important. When you're researching, you want to ask and look for, do they have the emphasis that you want, concentrations? Are you going to be able to learn what you want to learn and what you want to focus on? What about that culminating experience? Is it only have a thesis option when you really want to do a project that you have in mind, or maybe it's flexible and you like that, right? Is the program offered in the timeline that you need? What about you only can do evening classes, but they only offer daytime? These are all things that you want to consider in terms of coursework when you are researching grad programs, okay? Next thing that you'll need to decide, do you want to go to a public university or a private university? There's benefits in both, and there are great universities in both sectors. So it's really, up to the program itself. Some things to consider when you're deciding is cost. A lot of time public universities are a lot cheaper than private universities, but sometimes private universities are going to have different and more funding opportunities. So could be a trade-off there, but you want to research and think about it in that sense. The size of the university would be important. You want to think about it in terms of networking, right? Are you going to have an alumni class of 1,000 students or 500 or whatever different numbers, right? You want to think about who you can be connected with once you finish that program, as well as during. You want to think about research, especially if your interest is to move on to a research role or even a PhD, which is a lot more research focused. Scholarship opportunities, internship job opportunities, individual attention, which kind of goes into the size of the program. Is it a cohort model? How many students are in each class? If you're not familiar with cohort, it means basically that you move through a program with the same group of students, right? So maybe there's 10 students in your cohort and you take every class together, with very few exceptions usually. Maybe you love that, maybe you hate that, right? So you want to ask, is it a cohort model? Maybe you want more flexibility and you want to be able to collaborate with other students, across the program and across levels. So those are some things to think about when you're thinking about public versus private and just universities in general, and kind of narrowing down your options. Then rankings. Rankings are still important and a great way to kind of narrow things down. You want to make sure you're looking at reputable ranking lists. Sometimes they do an overall school like Cal State Fullerton. Other times they'll do a specific program like accounting at Cal State Fullerton, for example, right? So keep in mind what kind of ranking they're doing, and so that you can take everything with a grain of salt, okay? It's not the end all be all. It's just like when everybody uses rate my professor, it's subjective to some extent, but it's a good place to start a lot of times and gives you also some information of, oh, I hadn't considered that, but the ranking says they're really great at this. Maybe I should consider that aspect when I'm looking at different programs. Okay, I've listed some reputable places where you can look for programs like that, or a ranking list like that, so you can take a look there. And then in terms of rankings, they can also let you know the level and opportunity of research. Again, important depending on how much research you're hoping to do. Okay. All right, some other things that you really want to consider is modality. So what that means is, do you need in-person classes? Do you need online classes? Do you need hybrid? Do you need all of the options? You know, what is gonna, what are your restraints in terms of everything that you have going on personally? And what do you need from a grad program in terms of your coursework? To keep in mind, or when you're looking for online classes, keep in mind asynchronous or synchronous. You might be familiar already, but if you haven't taken online classes, you might not. And asynchronous basically means that you can log in and do your work, maybe listen to a recorded lecture at any time, right? Or a recorded class. Synchronous means it's still online, but you're expected to log in at a certain time, maybe for a live class session, and then do your work and stuff like that. Both of them will have deadlines. Both of them, you're still learning the information, but it depends on your availability and what you can do. So you want to ask that question, especially if you're looking for online programs. Okay. Accreditation is also an important piece. Accreditation, the meaning of it is basically the process that institutions go through to confirm that they are still meeting high quality standards. So it's something that every couple years schools have to say, okay, this is what we're doing to make sure we're hiring great teachers, to make sure that we are teaching our students all the things that they need to know. It's like a test for universities, okay? There's regional accreditation, national accreditation agencies. Some professions will have certain accreditation assigned to it that you really want to look out for. The one I know off the top of my head is like for school counseling, you want it to be a KCREP accredited institution. So, you know, look around those professional organizations to see if for your job you need to have a specific accredited school or program that you're looking into. Okay. And then faculty, obviously a huge aspect of your graduate program. These are who you're going to be working closely with. You usually work a lot closer with your graduate school faculty than you did in undergrad. You get to know them better. So you want to, you know, check out their research, their scholarly work, size of faculty in your program and caliber, and are they teaching what you want to learn? Okay. All right, last page of some aspects that you want to consider when you're comparing programs. Cost. Money matters, we know that, and your financial situation matters. So you'll always need to take this into account. Regardless of where you end up applying, we recommend do FAFSA every year, especially if you're already doing it in undergrad. Just keep the habit of doing it every year when you're in your grad program or right before you start your grad program, so that they give you, you know, the full range of options in terms of your funding. It's likely going to look a lot different than for your undergrad, and that's okay. If you have questions, talk to their financial aid office. Make sure that you understand what they're offering you. Before you take out any funding, make sure that you understand the differences of those funding opportunities. Okay, but it's definitely a huge thing that you'll need to consider. And then location is another thing to consider, whether you're planning to stay local or maybe you want to move somewhere different and do something completely different. You know, think about where your support system is. Are you comfortable in the area? Cost of living, things like that, as well as lifestyle. Whether you're commuting, you're going to move there, or move even further, right, to a school out of the country. So those are all important things personally to take into account. And then you want to look into student resources and support. So maybe you got a lot of resources in your undergraduate program and you know, felt like every step of the way you had someone there, and that's great. And if you want similar support, you want to check out those resources that they have in the program or the university. Some examples: the program advisor, university services like Career Center, financial aid. Do they have student organizations and events for grad students on their campus? And kind of reach out, see what they offer, see if it feels like the right amount of support for you. Okay. Okay, so we talked about so many things that you want to compare and that you want to keep in mind. How do you keep it all together and, you know, keep, as you're researching, potentially, you know, a lot of schools? Kind of depends how many you want to apply for. So this is something I just Googled and pulled off the internet that you can use or recreate of your own. And you'll see lots of different categories, all of those things that we talked about, you can put in its own row, and then you can have your different college names that you're looking into or different programs, kind of answer the question about all of those different things so that it's all in one spot. So this is just one way to organize yourself. There's so many of these spreadsheets already made, or again, make one for yourself on a Google Doc or whatever you use, so that you can keep everything together. Okay. This is another example specifically for an application checklist. We're going to talk a little bit more about requirements that you might be asked to get in line when you're applying to schools, but this is a great way to keep track of, okay, I sent this in, I've done this statement of purpose, I need to get my letters of recommendation, whatever the case may be. So for each school that you're applying to, just to keep yourself organized, because especially if you're applying to several schools, you're going to want to, you know, make sure that you're staying on top of all of your deadlines and requirements. Okay, so now we're going to talk about actually applying to grad school. What does that look like, feel like? What should you kind of be doing? So first, if you're still in your undergrad program, I would say have a check-in with your undergrad advisor. Double check that you know when you're planning to graduate and that it's on track with what they're seeing as well. Okay. And then also, is there a way or a need to boost your GPA? Okay, so ask them, you know, are there classes you need to repeat? Is there anything that can help bump you up to make you a more competitive applicant when you're getting ready for grad school? Okay. Application requirements are going to vary. We'll talk a little bit more about what some of those options are in the next few slides, but confirm what you need for each program that you're applying to. And then also take any entrance exams. So GRE, GMAT, LSAT, these are all examples of standardized tests that some grad programs require. So if you're applying to one that needs the GRE, then you're going to need to take the GRE, right? So you want to make sure you're building in time for that so that when you're applying to schools, you have that score ready to send in by the deadline. Okay, and then keep in mind that the Career Center can review your statement of purpose or your resume that you might need for your graduate applications, and they are a great resource. We'll have their contact information at the end of the presentation too. Okay. Letters of recommendation are also really common, not required for all programs, but a lot of times they are. And so you want to make sure as you're leading up to applying to grad school, that you are continuing to build those connections with faculty so that they know who you are, they know your accomplishments, and they can write you letters of rec. If you take time off between undergrad and applying to grad school, like gap year, maintain your contact with these professors. Keep talking to them. Let them, you know, keep seeing you, right? So that they remember you and so that you can ask them for their letter of rec at a later time. Research opportunities, seek these out so that you have something else to kind of put on your applications, especially if you're going to a research-focused program. Reach out to departments and professors for research opportunities, check your emails for stuff like that around campus. And then internship and job opportunities, similar there, utilize the Career Center. Is there anything that can help boost your application that you can do now? Okay. This is an example or a few examples of timelines, right? Because a lot of times they're like, when should I start doing stuff? When should I start doing all of these things to apply to grad school? So the first one you'll see, undergrad to master's, no gap. Okay, so you didn't take any time off. Maybe you're graduating in the spring and you're hoping to start a grad program in the fall. So freshman and sophomore year is really your time to explore your major, your coursework, finalize your major if you're undeclared. Junior year is main prep year. Okay, so you want to do your career exploration, make sure that you know or you have a direction. Focus on your GPA, making sure that it's as good as it can be, internship, research opportunities, and really get into it with researching your grad programs. Okay, this is also a great time to take any or prepare for those entrance exams so that you can take them, maybe the end of your junior year or even summer of your junior year. Okay. And then senior year, you want to confirm your graduation date. Hopefully you've been doing this already. Begin applying to grad school in the fall semester, okay? Because most deadlines are at the end of December or early January every year, right? Most programs are going to start in the fall and have those deadlines. Some will admit in the spring too, but to get the bulk of the options, you want to have all your stuff ready by December or early January for the most part. Okay. And keep in mind too, if it took you 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, however long to do your undergrad, great. These kind of benchmarks still apply for the most part. So kind of your second to last year, you want to do your main prep. Last year, you want to have been applying so that you can start in the following fall after you graduate. Okay. All right. This next one you'll see are gap years or just one gap year. So during your gap year, the goal is really to gain work or research experience, or maybe you just need a mental break. That's okay too. But a lot of times you want to highlight things that you can do that'll make you a great applicant. If you are taking your gap year and know that you want to go back to your grad program. So that's what you'll focus on during the gap time. Utilize Career Center resources as well. And then spring of your application year, okay, you're going to confirm all your application requirements. You got everything lined up, ready to go. And then you're going to prepare and take any entrance exams, again, spring or summer. And then by the fall, you'll be ready to apply. And again, end of December, early January deadlines, okay? The next one is fairly similar, but what if you want to go to undergrad, to master's, to PhD? Okay, you're going to go the distance, the academic distance is what I call it. So you do undergrad pretty much the same, then you get into your master's program. It's usually 2 to 3 years, depending on the timeline. You're going to take time to work on research, develop relationships with faculty during your master's program. And then it's going to be similar. In the spring of your application year, you're going to confirm all the requirements, make sure you've checked everything off that you need to do, take those entrance exams, so forth. And then also in the fall semester, that's when you'll start applying to PhD programs. They're going to have similar deadlines of December or early January for the bulk of them. Okay. All right, and then we wanted to talk just briefly about actually applying to the CSU, because we know a lot of our students move on from the CSU to a CSU grad program. So few things to keep in mind. There are 2 admission steps. You must be admitted on both levels. First is the university CSU level. Okay, and then program department level, where you have other individual requirements for that program. So what that means is for the university level, for grad programs, you're going to be submitting the Cal State Apply app, just like you did if you're one of our undergrad students. Okay, and then you need a 4-year baccalaureate degree or bachelor's degree, then you're in good standing. Okay, your GPA minimum needs to be a 2.5 cumulative GPA from your bachelor's degree, or 2.5 GPA in the last 60 semester units attempted. Okay, so maybe you had a rough start, but at the end, you're great, you know, your last 60 units. So you want to keep that in mind and those minimum university requirements. International students will have a few additional requirements like language and sometimes higher GPA requirements, just because they want to make sure, you know, from their other school in another country that it's up to par. Okay. Then department and program requirements, you might have some additional things, could look like this. Okay, so a lot of times they might even have their own program application, extra transcripts, test scores like we've talked about, letters of recommendation, essays, personal statement, or even a writing sample, interview, audition, portfolio, especially for the arts. Okay, so you always want to make sure for CSU applications that you know any extras that you're going to need to meet. Okay, and you can find all those on our websites, talk to the grad advisors. We'll have that information on the last slides as well. And then just to give you a frame of reference for the CSU applications, okay, fall applications open October 1st, spring August 1st, and then program deadlines are going to vary depending on the program. So you want to do some individual research there, okay? And then specifically for Cal State Fullerton, we often get a lot, well, does Cal State Fullerton have a program in whatever? Probably. We have a lot of grad programs. You'll see them all listed there. Of course, we have it online as well. But also remember to check out other CSUs. You don't have to go to Cal State Fullerton if you're an undergrad here with us, of course. You also might consider UCs or, of course, private schools, schools out of state, everything like that. So as you're in your research phase, but take a look at what we offer here at Fullerton. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about funding. So funding is going to look different for everybody depending on your situation, but one option are grants. So grants are basically money that you don't have to pay back, okay? Still fill out that FAFSA or the California Dream Act, the CDA each year for federal, state grant options or loan offerings. And still apply even if you've been told that your financial aid is running out. It's different for grad, okay? For your grad program, still apply. It doesn't hurt you, it's free, okay? And there's always the March 2nd deadline. So see what you're offered. Maybe you'll get more than you think, okay? Scholarships and fellowships, you always want to look for these. CSUF and CSU offer a wide variety of scholarships. Other schools do too. You can check out our financial aid office. We'll have that link at the end. They have a whole scholarship application portal through your student portal, and they give you guidelines of how to find those and apply to ones, anything that sounds like it fits for you. There's also outside and independent scholarships, and scholarships and fellowships sometimes have requirements attached, so keep that in mind. Maybe you have to do like a mentorship or go to certain meetings, but you don't have time for that. Keep that in mind, right? Because we want to make sure that you can meet the requirements of your scholarship. Loans, of course, are often a big part of a student's graduate degree program. There are federal loan options for grad students. Again, that would come from FAFSA. There's also, of course, private options. Just make sure you're double checking the terms for your loans, asking questions, be informed before you take out a ton of loans that you don't know how to pay back, right? Because that happens a lot of the time with our education system, unfortunately. And then also research repayment and forgiveness options, especially if you're going into teaching or the public service sphere. There's opportunities there that you can look into and see if you'll qualify for, depending on your field that you hope to go into. Okay. And then there's also assistantships or campus jobs. Campus opportunities, reach out to the Career Center, connect with your departments and instructors. They can let you know of anything that's coming up. These are our front desk assistants. These are our, great student assistants that are getting paid to work on campus. Okay. All right, and then our grad studies office specifically has a few funding opportunities. So if you find yourself at Cal State Fullerton for your grad program, these are some ones that you can look into. We have a grad equity fellowship, Palante fellowship. Both of these are outlined on our website. Again, you'll have links to those in the next slide or two. We also have a Sally Casanova scholarship. If you are interested in going on to your PhD, look into this one, see if you fit into the requirements there. As well, similarly for the Chancellor's Doctoral Incentive Program, it's really for students who want to go on to the PhD and then teach at the CSU. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on those, but if you're interested in PhD, I would recommend checking those out, and they can be found on our website, which we'll link you to in just a sec. Okay. All right, so now we've gotten to the resources page. There's so many resources on campus. So I'm going to walk you through a few of them. So first, if you're considering grad programs here at Fullerton and you want to know more about one, talk to the program advisor. The link is there, tiny URL. Again, you're going to get these, the slides, and you can just click on them because they'll be linked for you. So you'll get emailed this, but check with the program advisor, talk with them about the program. They are the expert. Okay. Also, even if after this presentation, you're like, I still don't know where to start, I'm overwhelmed, that's okay. We have prospective grad advising with Project Upgrads, which is a grant program on campus. So they have an advisor who you can reach out to and schedule an appointment with. So that link is there as well. Career Center, again, we've tried to plug them a couple times in this session, so make sure you're utilizing them during your time. This is something you pay for as a student. So if you're not utilizing the Career Center, you're definitely missing out, especially while you are a current student. And again, you can still utilize the Career Center a year after you graduate, or you can sign up for their alumni package and then utilize their services that way. Okay, and they can help you with proofreading your statement of purpose, resume, cover letter, job search, all that stuff. And then the Graduate Studies Center, which is where I work. This is a great resource on campus if you just want to hang out. Also, we do events like this, so you can take a look at our website and see if there's any other things that look interesting to you, even if you are a prospective grad student. We serve prospective and current grad students. Okay. All right, and then we also have the Office of Admissions. Maybe you have some questions for them, especially if you're applying to Cal State Fullerton. Office of Financial Aid can always be helpful to everybody, right? And then those grad student funding opportunities that we talked about that are, or grad studies funding opportunities that are specifically from our department, you can find those there. Okay, so you'll get these slides and you can just easily click on all of these resources. All right, that's the end of the presentation, which I feel like I've thrown a lot of information at you, but I hope that you've gotten some great insight. If you could take a minute to do our survey, we have the QR code or the link there that maybe Carolyn, can you type that in the chat box really quick? It's very few questions. We would appreciate feedback from you. And while you all are doing that, if you have any questions that, throughout the presentation, anything we can help you with, feel free to type those in the chat and we can answer those for you. Guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope that it was helpful, and please take the survey so we get some feedback and know what kind of presentations to give you in the future. Thank you again. It was great having you.